on releasing one part of this, and whenever I explain it, I hope you will understand why. When we received the recorders from the CRJ, we were able to define an altitude of where it was very close to the time of impact. That is a data point we feel very comfortable with. We also have an initial set of information in regard to what was being seen on the cab in the control tower. We have not finalized that and need to get more granularity to it, and we currently don't have the readout from the Black Hawk. I put all that into context for you in that whenever I give you some altitude information, one part of the three pieces we have defined. Another part we feel fairly confident but need to get more information, and a third we don't even have. Currently, the CRJ, based upon the data recorder, at the time of impact was at 325 feet, plus or minus 25 feet. This is from the belly of the CRJ. The CRJ itself is 20 feet and 8 inches from the wheel to the top of the tail. So from the belly, the CRJ at time of impact was 325, less or minus 25 degrees. And for those who follow this closely, that is a corrected altitude. It is based on the NTSB data and the flight data recorder. Our preliminary review of what the tower cab was showing on the data screen that would have been in front of the controllers was 200 feet near the time of the accident. Again, this data is preliminary. Tomorrow, we feel very comfortable that we'll be getting the additional data sources that will confirm precisely what it would have been on the screen at the time. And I would also caution you, there's typically in the cab on that screen, it may be a 4 to 5 second refresh rate. But obviously, this is something that we're going to be looking at very closely. The third prong of that is the helicopter recorders. Between those three, whenever we have those data points finalized, we feel that we'll be very comfortable in saying exactly what altitude this occurred at. And I know that's been a lot of speculation. You may have a few questions on it, but I want to caution, we're trying to give you what information we have and we verified at that time. With that, we'll take some questions. Just one second. Ma'am?
Claudia from the AP. So you said that the altitude, and the recorder recorded the altitude of the CRJ. Was it trying to pull up before the collision? Was that what you were saying?
The question was the altitude that was read from the NTSB and the voice recorder, was it trying to pull up? I can tell you at one point very close to the impact, there was a slight change in pitch, an increase in pitch. That is something that we will get you more detail on, but it was an indication of an increase in pitch.
Thank you, Todd Grady, Triple with the Fox. So are you also saying that there was a 100-foot discrepancy between what the air traffic controller was seeing on the screen in front of them and what the height, the altitude of the plane? There was a 100 feet difference?
So the question is, was there a 100 feet difference between what we found the plane to be operating at and the air traffic control tower? I'm saying the initial data we have on the control tower cab says 200 feet would have been visualized. This is a fairly good estimate, but it needs to be finalized. I shouldn't say estimate. It's a fairly good initial read. It needs to be finalized. And again, the CRJ was operating at 325 feet, plus or minus 25.
And how common is it that the two aircraft would be operating on different frequencies with the same control tower?
The question is, how common would it be that the two aircraft would be operating on separate frequencies? It is completely common. Military operates on one frequency, civilian on another. We're just trying to clarify that because you're only reading or hearing some things online, so we're trying to get out and dispel some myths. Yes, sir.
Mr. Inman, Dave Laval with DC News Now. At this point, you've given us the CRJ, but can you speculate on the altitude of the PAT at this point?
We cannot the question is, can we give any information on the altitude of the PAT? We cannot at this point. Obviously, an impact occurred, and I would say when an impact occurs, that is typically where the altitude of both aircraft were at the moment. But again, whenever we have the data from the recorder, we will be able to give you more specific.
And just to follow up, if I may, sir, there have been reports, can you comment on reports that PAT may have flown above its max limit for that airspace?
So the question was, can I comment on reports that PAT may have flown above its max limits? No, because I haven't heard that. And I don't try to look at the media that much. So by not saying that, I'm not denying, but I just haven't heard it. We haven't discussed it. I'll ask the investigator in charge. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, I can provide just a little bit of context. The PAT 25 was within the lateral boundaries of a helicopter route. The ceiling of that route was 200 feet. As Member Inman said, we have not got the data out of the FDR for the Black Hawk at this time, but that's what we know.
Okay, we're going to go down here.
David Kaplan with Fox 5 here in D.C. You mentioned as you walked through the timeline that there was a broadcast over the cockpit of traffic. Can you talk about what indications, if any, you have that the plane's anti-collision system was working? It's my understanding that that broadcast goes out if the system has been activated. Can you comment on what you've learned about the anti-collision system?
The question is about the traffic that was heard on the cockpit voice recorder. I can say this: we are defining what is inside of each system and what they were outputting. Because of the unique nature of military aircraft, we need additional specialization, which we have. But for right now, we're trying to present you with what we've heard. So we need further information to be able to find why it was indicating traffic. Yes?
Yeah, the night goggles. How will you determine if they were wearing the night goggles or not?
The question was, how will we determine if they were wearing the night vision goggles or not? Part of that will be based, and we already know during the extraction of the bodies, how they were presented and what was around them. I can say that impact was very significant. And so it will take additional analysis of their helmets, the attached areas. We're looking to find if the night vision goggle bags, whenever we extract the aircraft, are they empty? Are they found in the debris field? There's a lot of different variables we need to find out before we determine that. Yes?
Thanks, Chase Williams from Fox Business. I know that it was 4 minutes before impact that there was a runway switch. They switched to 33. How routine is that? And is that enough lead time for pilots and other traffic in the area to be aware of, a change in the patterns?
Okay, so the question was in regard to, and the term you used was runway switch. And we briefed this yesterday. The CRJ was on approach to runway 33. They'd been brought in that way. As they were coming in, they were asked by the air traffic control, could they accept, let me reverse that. They were coming in on runway 1. As they were on approach, the air traffic controller said, can you accept runway 33? That is not an uncommon occurrence at DCA. It creates an arcing of the flight path, so it's very normal. Pilots were able to discuss it. They accepted it. They appear to be on a proper, at least, lineup at that time. So right now, we'll evaluate it with all the other facts and data, but it is what it is at this point, I guess. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dominique Moody with NBC Washington. I just have a question about the staffing in the air tower. Can you tell me if that's common for it to have that level of staffing, or is it traditionally more people inside of the cabin?
The question was the staffing at the time of the actual accident with the 5 individuals. I have not gotten an update from the air traffic control people. I know the primary thing we wanted to get was exactly that, and there's been discussions because, again, can change based on the day of the week, the time, the weather. So we will not categorize anything as typical right now until we can present it in a better fashion. Yes, sir.
Eric Gilchrist, NBC News. If I heard you correctly, you said that the tower was able to see the airplane at 200 feet. The tower instruments read it at 200 feet. Did it not read where the helicopter was at the same time?
The question was, it was reading the airplane. Could it not read the helicopter? It could read the helicopter. And the reason why I'm saying it could, and this is again getting into more specific information, the definition that's needed for us to evaluate that further will be downloaded tomorrow. Do you want to answer a little bit on how those control towers, or I'm happy to continue. Okay. Those monitors obviously assimilate different pieces of information. So our initial read was showing that. We're giving you the 200 feet as indicative of the CRJ. I don't want to speculate specifically on the Black Hawk. Sorry, it's reversed, right? Come on.
So, as previously stated, we know that the FDR and data provided indicated that the CRJ was at 325 feet, plus or minus 25 feet. We also, initial preliminary data right now indicates that on the tower's radar scope that was available to the controller, initial data indicates that he may have seen 200 feet. That needs to be verified. Our ATC group is working it. We will have more data available, but those are the initial indications.
And no indication for the Black Hawk though, on that screen at that same time?
The data that I'm talking about, the 200-foot data that would have been available on that radar scope, that was the Black Hawk. The 325-foot that we've given you is ADSB data, FDR data, other data combined to get an accurate altitude of the CRJ, 325 plus or minus 25. The radar data, where that helicopter is down at 200 feet, it has less fidelity. So our team is looking into that, but I think it's important to note that this is a complex investigation. There's a lot of pieces here. Our team is working very hard to gather this data, make sure we, as Member Inman has said, understand why this happened.
Sorry, Bryce, can I...
Hang on, I'll call on people. Yes, ma'am. So the question again, and I'm going to try to say this one more time, the CRJ at the time of impact, based on ADSB data and the voice and the data and the flight recorder, shows that that airplane was positioned at 325 feet plus or minus 25 feet. On the radar scope in the cab, our preliminary review shows that the Black Hawk helicopter would have visualized at 200 feet. It's not as defined. That is preliminary. We will get more significant information. We wanted to present the 325 plus or minus because we knew that. We have good certainty with it, but without presenting it with the radar scope information or with presenting that, it could cause some conflict. So I'm going to be very careful to make sure we still have a lot more work to do. These are one of thousands of data points and will be hundreds of thousands of pages. We're trying to release the information as we know it and make sure we're giving the best information that's accurate and learning from it. Yep.
Yesterday you talked about spending time with some of the victims' families. Can you describe any sort of update today with them?
Well, the question is about spending time with the members' families. Yeah, I spent several hours with them today. There's more There's some new. There's some that have been there for 3 days. There's some that want to give us hugs. There's some that are just mad and angry. They're just all hurt, and they still want answers, and we want to give them answers. And the most devastating thing, I guess, today was they watched the news last night. They know their loved ones are recovering. They're thinking, is it going to take longer? Am I not going to be finding my loved one? How will this affect it? That's hard. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible. And no one should suffer this. So, yeah, it is hard on them. They have a lot of questions. They haven't been through this. Unfortunately, we have a lot of experts. We've done 1,000, but that doesn't mean it's not completely new to them. What's really horrible, though, is that these things are happening. You know, I keep a challenge coin. Whenever I first got to the NTSB, they asked, it's a challenge coin you hand to people as a sign of gratitude and respect. The front of it has the seal and name. I said, what do you want to put on the back? This was on the front door of our training center where the TW-800 was for many years. From tragedy, we draw knowledge to improve the safety for us all. That's what we're doing right now. We're dealing with tragedy, but we need to improve safety. We need 200 plus recommendations fixed. We need people to take action. Unfortunately, at some point, all of you are going to be gone. We're still going to have the investigation open. We're going to make recommendations. We go to East Palestine, a community that gets devastated. Still nothing's happened. We have several hundred recommendations open for aviation. You want to do something about it? Adopt the recommendation of the NTSB. You'll save lives. Get off and do something. I don't want to have to meet with another set of those parents like that again. It's not fair. Could be your family. Sorry, I didn't mean to take it out on you. It's just hard. Sorry. Yeah.
I have two, and I just want to follow up because I want to make sure I understand the elevation question correctly. The flight data recorder on the CRJ is showing 325 plus or minus 25. That's correct, right?
The question is, and I apologize, I've said this 3 or 4 times, on the CRJ, the flight data recorder that has been localized from the ADSB data and other is showing the time of impact, it was at 325 plus or minus 25 feet.
Okay. The 200 feet inside of the air traffic control cab was for the helicopter. Is that
The question again, the preliminary data that we have not validated yet and are still trying to verify was that the radar scope was showing the helicopter at 200 feet. Now, again, we're not saying plus or minus because we don't really know that. It's not as granular. We will have the exact data set tomorrow evening. We knew you would have some questions, so please be responsible in reporting this. We need more info, but we know that some of that information is coming out, and we're trying to provide it. No more. Sorry, I've answered the same question several times. Sorry. Go ahead.
This is just a clarification point on this topic. I understand what the radar scope in the ATC cap was showing and what the black box showed you from the CRJ. I guess the question is, what would explain the discrepancy, which appears to be 100 feet, when clearly they hit each other?
So the question is, what would explain this discrepancy? That's what our job is to figure that out. That's what we're doing. That's the reason we're giving you information to dispel some information that may be out there. We're the gold standard across the world because we tell the facts. And sometimes we have to give a little bit something preliminary so that you don't have an improper picture. That's what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The 4 to 5 second delay that you described, where was that?